The autumn sun hung low over Charlottesville, Virginia, casting long amber shadows across the quiet streets of the Belmont neighborhood. It was Sunday, October 12th, 2014, and the air carried that particular crispness that makes people pull their sweaters a little tighter. Leaves in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson tumbled lazily across front lawns, gathering in small piles against white picket fences that lined the residential blocks. Emily Carter stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the strap of her camera bag. At 15, she had that awkward grace of someone caught between childhood and adulthood, tall and thin, with light brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, freckles scattered across her nose like constellations. Her green eyes held that distant, thoughtful quality of someone always looking for the next perfect shot. "Em, you're going to miss it if you don't leave now," her mother, Susan, called from the kitchen. The smell of Sunday pot roast filled the house, mingling with the scent of freshly baked bread. It was the kind of home that felt lived in and loved. Family photos covering every wall, her younger siblings' drawings magnetized to the refrigerator, a worn couch in the living room where they'd spent countless movie nights together. "I know, Mom. Just grabbing my jacket." Emily snatched her denim jacket from the coat rack, checking her camera one more time. It was a Canon Rebel T3i, a birthday gift from her parents that she'd begged for all summer. Photography had become her obsession over the past year. She was always chasing light angles, moments that others overlooked. Her 12-year-old brother Tyler looked up from his video game. "Can I come, please?" "Not this time, buddy. I need to focus." Emily ruffled his hair affectionately. "Besides, golden hour waits for no one." "What's golden hour?" 7-year-old Lily asked, appearing in the doorway with her stuffed rabbit clutched under one arm. "It's when the sun is low and makes everything look magical," Emily explained, crouching down to Lily's level. "Like everything's covered in honey-colored light. That's when you take the best pictures." Susan emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a petite woman with worry lines that had deepened over the years, the kind of mother who still checked on her children's breathing while they slept. "You'll be back before dark, right? Dinner's at 6:30. Promise. I'm just going to Willow Creek Park. It's like a 10-minute walk." Emily kissed her mother's cheek, already mentally composing the shots she wanted to capture. The swing set silhouetted against the sunset, the old oak tree with its twisted branches reaching toward the sky. Maybe some close-ups of the fallen leaves if the light hit them just right. "Take your phone," her father David said from his position in the armchair where he was reading the Sunday paper. He was a mechanic who owned a small shop on Main Street, a man of few words but deep reliability. "And keep it on you." Emily held up her iPhone, its pink case slightly cracked at one corner. "Always do, Dad. Be safe, sweetheart." Susan's voice carried that particular maternal mixture of love and anxiety that Emily had grown used to. Her mother worried about everything, about strangers, about traffic, about the world in general. Emily sometimes felt suffocated by it, but she understood it came from love. "Mom, it's Charlottesville. Nothing ever happens here." Emily smiled, slinging her camera bag across her shoulder. "I'll be back before you know it." The screen door creaked as she stepped out onto the front porch. The neighborhood stretched before her in perfect suburban tranquility. Neat lawns, American flags hanging from porches, Mrs. Henderson watering her garden next door, old Mr. Phillips washing his vintage Buick in his driveway. Down the street she could hear the distant laughter of children playing basketball. Emily walked with purpose, her sneakers crunching against the scattered leaves on the sidewalk. She knew this route by heart, past the Henderson house with its elaborate Halloween decorations already up, past the corner store where she and her friends bought candy after school, past the small white church with its tall steeple that seemed to pierce the autumn sky. Willow Creek Park sat at the edge of the neighborhood, a modest municipal space that had been there for decades. It wasn't large, maybe 2 acres, but it had everything a community park needed: a playground with swings, slides, and a merry-go-round, a small pavilion with picnic tables, a walking path that circled the perimeter, and at its heart, a magnificent weeping willow tree that had given the park its name. As Emily approached, she noticed the park was nearly empty. A young couple was walking their dog along the far path, and an elderly man sat on one of the benches feeding pigeons, but the playground itself was deserted. Perfect. She loved having the space to herself when she was working. The late afternoon light was exactly what she'd hoped for, golden and warm, casting everything in that dreamy glow that made even ordinary objects look extraordinary. She pulled out her camera, adjusting the settings as she moved toward the playground. The swing set creaked gently in the breeze, its chains producing that distinctive metallic sound that seemed to echo with memories of childhood. Emily had spent countless hours here as a kid, pumping her legs to go higher, feeling that momentary weightlessness at the apex of each swing. She and Tyler would compete to see who could jump farther, landing in the worn patch of dirt beneath. She raised her camera, framing the empty swing against the sun. Click. The light was filtering through the chains, creating interesting shadows. Click. She moved around, trying different angles, getting low to the ground to capture the texture of the wood chips beneath the equipment. A man in a dark green jacket was doing something near the storage shed at the edge of the park. One of the maintenance workers, she assumed. She'd seen him around before, though she didn't know his name. He seemed to be locking up, preparing to leave for the day. The park officially closed at dusk, though people often stayed later. Emily checked her phone. 5:47 p.m. She still had time. The light was getting even better as the sun dropped lower, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. She wanted to get some shots from under the willow tree, where the hanging branches created natural frames. She made her way across the playground, past the slide where Lily had broken her arm 2 summers ago, past the merry-go-round that Tyler still loved despite being too old for it. The willow tree stood like a guardian at the center of the park, its drooping branches forming a curtain that provided shade in summer and a sense of secret sanctuary year-round. Ducking under the canopy of branches, Emily felt the world outside disappear. It was quieter here, more isolated. She set her camera bag down on one of the gnarled roots that broke through the surface of the ground and began shooting, the way the light filtered through the leaves, the patterns the branches created against the sky, the trunk with its deep grooves and texture. She was completely absorbed in her work, in that meditative state where nothing existed except the viewfinder and the perfect shot. Minutes passed unnoticed. The light was changing rapidly now, getting deeper, richer. A sound made her pause. Footsteps on the path. She lowered her camera, listening. The couple with the dog had left. The old man feeding pigeons was gone. The park seemed suddenly very quiet, very empty. "Park's closing soon, miss." The voice came from behind her, making her jump. It was the maintenance worker standing just outside the willow's canopy. Up close, she could see he was maybe in his 40s, with thinning brown hair and a weathered face. His name tag read Robert Mills Park Services. "Oh, sorry, I'm almost done. Just a few more shots." Emily smiled politely, the way her parents had taught her to be respectful to adults. "Take your time. Just wanted to let you know." His smile seemed friendly enough, but there was something about the way he stood there, not leaving, that made her slightly uncomfortable. "You're that girl who's always taking pictures, right, Emily?" She felt a small flutter of unease. How did he know her name? Yeah, I come here a lot. I've seen you. You're real talented. My daughter used to be into photography too." He took a step closer and Emily instinctively took a step back. She was about your age. That's nice." Emily glanced at her phone. 6:03 p.m. Her mom would be expecting her soon. "I should probably head home. Just 1 second. I wanted to show you something. There's this spot by the storage shed where the light hits real pretty this time of day. Professional photographers come sometimes. You might like it for your pictures." Every instinct told Emily to decline, to leave, to trust that uncomfortable feeling in her stomach. But he was a park employee, an adult, someone official, and she didn't want to be rude. That's what girls were taught, wasn't it? Be polite. Don't make a scene. Don't assume the worst of people. "I really should get home," she started. "It'll just take a minute. Promise. Your parents won't mind you being a couple minutes late for dinner, right?" His tone was casual, friendly, but something in his eyes didn't match the smile on his face. Emily hesitated, her fingers tightening around her camera. The rational part of her brain was screaming at her to leave, but the polite, well-raised part, the part that had been conditioned not to offend, made her nod weakly. "Okay, just real quick." She picked up her camera bag and followed him out from under the willow, toward the far side of the park where the small maintenance shed stood. The sun was lower now, the shadows longer. The parking lot beyond the park was empty except for an old white van. As they walked, Emily pulled out her phone more out of nervous habit than anything else. She opened her camera app, switching to video mode, and set it down on one of the benches they passed, propping it against the back so it was recording. She'd accidentally done this before and ended up with strange footage of nothing, but something made her do it now. Some unconscious survival instinct. "Right over here," Robert said, leading her past the shed. There was nothing here but a chain-link fence and some overgrown bushes. No special light. No photographer's secret spot. Emily stopped walking. I don't see... She never finished the sentence. Years later, investigators would piece together what happened in those next moments. But for Emily, time seemed to fracture and skip, like a film reel with missing frames. Back on the bench, her phone continued recording, the empty swing moving slightly in the breeze, the growing darkness, the sound of wind through leaves, and then much later, the creak of a van door closing. The footage would run until the battery died, capturing nothing but an empty park and the onset of night. By 6:45 p.m., when Susan Carter called her daughter's phone and got no answer, Emily was already gone. By 7 p.m., when David drove to the park to look for her, all he found was her phone on the bench still recording, and her camera bag lying in the wood chips beneath the swing set, its contents scattered as if dropped in a struggle. The nightmare had begun. The Charlottesville Police Department received the missing person report at 8:43 p.m. on October 12, 2014. Officer Janet Rodriguez was the first responder, arriving at the Carter residence on Meadowbrook Lane at 9:07 p.m. She found the family in various states of panic. Susan sitting on the couch, phone clutched in trembling hands, calling Emily's number over and over. David pacing the living room with barely contained fury and fear. Tyler and Lily upstairs with a neighbor who'd come to help. Tell me everything again from the beginning, Rodriguez said, pulling out her notepad. She was a 12-year veteran, a mother herself, and she'd handled missing juvenile cases before. Most of them ended well, kids losing track of time, going to a friend's house without permission, teenage rebellion. But something about Susan Carter's pale face and the phone still recording on that bench made her stomach tighten with dread. She left around 5:30, Susan said, her voice breaking, to take pictures at Willow Creek Park. She does it all the time. She promised she'd be back by 6:30 for dinner. Tears streamed down her face and she wiped them away with shaking hands. When she didn't come home, I called and called. David went to look for her and found. He found her phone, just sitting there, recording nothing. Why would she leave her phone? David stood by the fireplace, his mechanic's hands clenched into fists. Her camera bag was on the ground like she dropped it. Emily would never leave her camera, never. His voice was rough with emotion. Something happened to her. Someone took her. Rodriguez wrote quickly, her training kicking in despite the growing sense of urgency. Was she meeting anyone, a friend, a boyfriend? No, Susan said firmly. She was going alone to photograph the sunset. That's what she does. What she loves. She's a good girl. She doesn't get into trouble. She doesn't talk to strangers. Any recent arguments? Anything unusual happening at home or school? David's jaw tightened. Are you suggesting she ran away? My daughter didn't run away. Look at that phone footage, there's nothing. She vanished. I have to ask these questions, Mr. Carter. I'm trying to help. Rodriguez kept her tone professional but sympathetic. What was she wearing? Jeans, a white t-shirt, and her denim jacket, Susan whispered. Pink sneakers. She had her camera bag, black with purple trim, and she always wore this silver bracelet her grandmother gave her. Always. Rodriguez radioed for backup and called her supervisor. Within 30 minutes, Willow Creek Park was flooded with police vehicles, their blue and red lights painting the playground in eerie, pulsing colors. Detective Marcus Hayes, a veteran investigator with the Major Crimes Unit, took command of the scene. Hayes was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 40s with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. He'd worked homicides, kidnappings, drug operations, the dark underbelly of what most people thought was a safe, quiet college town. He approached the bench where Emily's phone had been found, now secured in an evidence bag. Talk to me, he said to Rodriguez, who'd secured the perimeter. 15-year-old female Emily Carter left home at approximately 5:30 p.m. to photograph the sunset. Expected back by 6:30 p.m. Parents found her phone here. She pointed to the bench. At approximately 7:00 p.m., camera bag found near the swing set. Contents scattered. Phone was recording video when found. I've watched it. Nothing useful. Just empty park, wind, darkness. Hayes pulled on latex gloves and examined the area carefully. The wood chips beneath the swing set showed signs of disturbance, but that could have been from normal play. The camera bag yielded no immediate clues. A lens cap, some memory cards, a water bottle. He bagged everything carefully. I want K9 units here now, Hayes ordered, and get me the park security footage. Park doesn't have cameras, Rodriguez replied. Budget cuts, Hayes swore under his breath. Of course not. What about surrounding businesses? Traffic cameras? Main Street has some traffic cams. I've already requested the footage. Good. I want witness canvassing. Every house within a 3-block radius. Someone saw something. Hayes looked around the darkened park, his experienced eyes cataloging every detail. And get me a list of every park employee, maintenance worker, anyone with regular access to this place. By midnight, the search was in full operation. K9 units had tracked Emily's scent from the bench to the area behind the maintenance shed where it abruptly stopped. That detail made Hayes's blood run cold. Scent trails didn't just disappear unless the person got into a vehicle or was carried away. The maintenance shed was locked, but Hayes got a warrant and had it opened. Inside, they found the usual equipment. Mowers, rakes, tools, cleaning supplies. Nothing obviously suspicious, but everything was carefully documented and photographed. Forensics would go through it inch by inch. Detective Sarah Chen, Hayes's partner, coordinated the witness interviews. She was methodical and thorough, a former FBI analyst who'd relocated to Charlottesville for a quieter life, a decision she sometimes questioned on cases like this. The elderly man who'd been feeding pigeons, Walter Morrison, was located at his home 2 blocks away. He remembered seeing Emily arrive at the park around 5:45 p.m. She was alone, had that camera of hers. Sweet girl, always says hello. He'd left around 6 p.m. and hadn't seen anything unusual. There was a park worker there, closing up. That's all. The couple with the dog, identified as Jennifer and Mark Lawson, confirmed similar details. They'd been at the park between 5:30 and 6:15 p.m. Yes, they'd seen Emily. Yes, there was a maintenance worker. No, they hadn't noticed anything suspicious. It's Willow Creek Park, Jennifer said, her voice full of regret. We thought it was safe. By 2 a.m., Detective Hayes had assembled his core team in the department's conference room. A large whiteboard displayed everything they knew. Timeline, witness statements, photos of the scene, and in the center, Emily's school photo, her smiling face a stark contrast to the grim circumstances. What do we know? Hayes asked, addressing the room. Chen consulted her notes. Emily Carter, age 15, honor student at Charlottesville High School. No history of running away, no troubled behavior, no boyfriend drama. According to friends and teachers, she's well-adjusted, passionate about photography, close with her family. She left home at 5:30 p.m. to photograph the sunset, something she did regularly. Multiple witnesses place her at Willow Creek Park between 5:45 and 6 p.m. The phone, Hayes said. That's key. The video was recording from 5:52 p.m. until the battery died at 7:43 p.m. Why would she set it to record? A young officer named Reeves spoke up. Maybe she didn't mean to. Could have been accidental. Maybe, Hayes said, unconvinced. Or maybe she felt unsafe and wanted evidence. The question is, evidence of what? Rodriguez added, K9 tracked her scent to behind the maintenance shed, then lost it. That suggests vehicle involvement. Someone could have grabbed her, forced her into a car or van. The maintenance worker, Chen said. Multiple witnesses mentioned him. We need to identify and locate him immediately. Hayes nodded. Already on it. Park Services gave us employee records. There are 3 maintenance workers assigned to Willow Creek Park. I want all of them brought in for questioning first thing in the morning. By dawn on October 13th, the case had exploded across local media. Emily's face was on every news station, every website. The Carter family held a tearful press conference at 9 a.m. pleading for information. Susan could barely speak, her voice choked with sobs. David stood beside her, his face a mask of controlled anguish. Please, Susan whispered into the microphone, if anyone knows anything, please come forward. Emily is our baby. She's just a child. She wants to be a photographer. She loves her brother and sister. She has her whole life ahead of her. Please, please help us bring her home. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of volunteers showed up to help search, combing through woods, checking abandoned buildings, distributing flyers. Local businesses donated food and supplies. A tip line was set up, and calls poured in, most well-meaning but useless, some from psychics and attention seekers, a few that seemed promising. Detective Hayes and his team worked around the clock. The 3 maintenance workers were interviewed extensively. 2 had solid alibis for the evening of October 12th. The third, Robert Mills, age 43, was on duty at Willow Creek Park until approximately 6:30 p.m. Hayes studied Mills across the interview table. The man seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hands, avoiding eye contact. Tell me about your evening on October 12th. I was working my regular shift, Mills said, his voice slightly shaky. Maintenance stuff, emptying trash, checking the equipment, locking up the shed. Normal routine. Did you see Emily Carter? The girl with the camera? Yeah, I saw her. She's there a lot, taking pictures. Did you speak to her? Mills hesitated just a fraction too long. I might have told her the park was closing soon. That's part of my job. What time was that? I don't know exactly, maybe 6:15? Chen, who was observing, leaned forward. You don't remember the exact time you spoke to a girl who disappeared that same evening? I talked to lots of people, Mills said defensively. It's not like I knew she was gonna. I didn't know anything was wrong. Hayes let the silence stretch, a classic interrogation technique. Mills grew more uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. What time did you leave the park? Hayes asked finally. Around 6:30, maybe 6:45. I had to finish locking everything up. Anyone see you leave? Can anyone verify that? I don't know, maybe. There might have been people around, but there weren't. The traffic camera footage from Main Street, reviewed frame by frame, showed Mills's white van leaving the park area at 7:03 p.m., well after he claimed to have left. When confronted with this discrepancy, Mills became agitated. I must have lost track of time, he said, sweat beading on his forehead. Sometimes I do extra checks, walk the perimeter. I'm thorough about my job. Hayes wasn't buying it. We'd like permission to search your van and your home. Mills's eyes widened. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm trying to cooperate here. Then you won't mind if we search? After a long pause, Mills nodded. Fine. Search whatever you want. You won't find anything because I didn't do anything. The search of Mills's van and his small rental house on the outskirts of Charlottesville yielded nothing immediately incriminating. No signs of Emily, no obvious evidence, but forensic analysis would take time. They were looking for DNA, fibers, anything that could link Mills to Emily's disappearance. Meanwhile, the investigation expanded in other directions. Emily's phone records showed no unusual calls or messages. Her social media accounts revealed a normal teenage life, photos of sunsets, selfies with friends, inside jokes. Her laptop was seized and analyzed. Nothing suspicious. Days turned into a week. The massive search operations continued, but hope was beginning to fade. Statistically, Hayes knew if a missing child wasn't found within the first 48 hours, the likelihood of finding them alive decreased dramatically. On October 20th, 8 days after Emily's disappearance, forensic results came back on samples from Mills's van. They found carpet fibers that could match Emily's jacket, but the analysis was inconclusive. The fibers were common, found in many clothing items. Without Emily's body or more concrete evidence, they couldn't build a case. Mills was released but remained under surveillance. He knew it too, became paranoid, stopped going to work. The community had already convicted him in the court of public opinion. His house was vandalized, threatening letters arrived. His boss at Park Services put him on indefinite leave. But without proof, Hayes couldn't arrest him. The case was going cold, and everyone knew it. By November, the daily searches had stopped, though volunteers still organized weekend efforts. The Carter family's lives had become frozen in that terrible moment of not knowing. Susan stopped sleeping, started taking anxiety medication. David threw himself into work, spending 18-hour days at his shop because being home, seeing Emily's empty room, was unbearable. Tyler became withdrawn and angry. Lily had nightmares. The community transformed Willow Creek Park into an unofficial memorial. Flowers piled up beneath the swing set where Emily's camera bag had been found. Teddy bears, candles, photos, handwritten notes from classmates and strangers alike. The swing moved in the wind and people swore they could hear echoes of children's laughter, though the park had been officially closed since Emily's disappearance. Detective Hayes never stopped working the case. He reviewed every piece of evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, followed up on every tip no matter how unlikely. But the trail had gone cold. Emily Carter had vanished as if she'd never existed, leaving behind only questions, grief, and a phone recording of an empty playground at dusk. Winter descended on Charlottesville with unusual harshness. By December 2014, Willow Creek Park lay under a blanket of dirty snow, the memorial flowers frozen and wilted beneath layers of ice. The playground equipment stood silent and abandoned, yellow police tape still fluttering from the fence posts, a grim reminder that this was no longer a place for children. Detective Marcus Hayes sat in his office on Christmas Eve, surrounded by case files that had become his obsession. Emily Carter's disappearance had burrowed into his mind like a splinter he couldn't remove. On his desk sat a photo of Emily laughing, captured at a family barbecue 3 months before she vanished. Her mother had given it to him, desperate for him to see Emily as a real person. not just another case number. "Go home, Marcus," Sarah Chen said from the doorway. She held 2 cups of coffee, steam rising in the cold office air. "It's Christmas Eve. Your daughter's probably waiting for you." Hayes accepted the coffee but didn't move. "Robert Mills is guilty. I know it in my bones, Sarah, but I can't prove it. We searched everything. His van, his house, his storage unit. Forensics found nothing definitive." Chen sat down across from him, her own frustration evident. The carpet fibers were circumstantial at best. His timeline doesn't completely add up, but that's not enough for a warrant, let alone an arrest. The traffic camera shows him leaving 20 minutes later than he claimed. 20 minutes, Sarah. That's enough time to... Hayes stopped, rubbing his eyes. Where is she? What did he do with her? Maybe we're wrong. Maybe it wasn't Mills. Then who? We've investigated every angle. Family members, school employees, known offenders in the area. Everyone has alibis or past polygraphs. Mills is the only one who was there, who had opportunity, who's acting guilty as hell. Chen sighed. Guilty behavior doesn't equal proof, you know that. Over the next months, the case remained stagnant. Mills moved out of Charlottesville in February 2015, relocating to somewhere in North Carolina where nobody knew his name or his face. The surveillance was dropped. The department couldn't justify the resources when they had no evidence to build a case. The Carter family existed in a terrible limbo. The not knowing was its own special torture. Was Emily suffering somewhere? Was she already dead? Should they hope or grieve? Susan attended support groups for parents of missing children, sitting in church basements sharing pain with other broken families. David's hair turned gray within 6 months. Tyler got into fights at school, angry at the world. Lily stopped playing, stopped smiling, became a shadow of the vibrant child she'd been. By summer 2015, the media attention had faded. New tragedies, new headlines. Emily became one of those faces on missing person posters that yellowed on community bulletin boards, that people walked past without really seeing. Just another statistics, another unsolved case. But Willow Creek Park developed a reputation. Locals began to avoid it even after it officially reopened in April 2015. Parents no longer brought their children there. Teenagers dared each other to visit at night, claiming it was haunted. People reported hearing strange things, laughter when no children were present, the creaking of swings moving in windless air, footsteps on the path when no one was visible. Detective Hayes knew these were just manifestations of collective guilt and grief. The community had failed to protect Emily, and now they projected their unease onto the space where she'd vanished. There were no such things as ghosts, only memories that refused to rest. In September 2015, a construction crew doing drainage work near the park's perimeter found a silver bracelet buried 6 inches in the mud. It was identified as possibly belonging to Emily, similar to the one her grandmother had given her. But the identification wasn't certain and its location revealed nothing about what had happened. The investigation briefly sparked to life again, then faded once more when no additional evidence was found. By 2016, the case was officially moved to cold case status. Hayes protested vigorously, but the reality was unavoidable. Without new leads, without evidence, there was nothing more to actively investigate. The file was placed in storage with hundreds of other unsolved cases and the department moved on. But Hayes never did. He retired in 2018 after 32 years with the Charlottesville Police Department. At his retirement party, colleagues toasted his distinguished career, his solved cases, his dedication. What they didn't mention was the Emily Carter file he'd taken home. Technically against protocol, but everyone looked the other way. They understood. Some cases got under your skin and never let go. Hayes spent his retirement years haunted by Emily's face. He'd wake at 3 in the morning, mind racing through evidence he'd reviewed 1,000 times. He made private inquiries about Robert Mills, tracking his movements. Mills had been arrested in 2017 for assault in Durham, North Carolina, served 18 months, got out in 2019. He was on the sex offender registry now for an incident involving a minor in 2020. Statutory rape. He'd pled down from worse charges. He's escalating, Hayes told Sarah Chen over coffee in 2021. She'd also retired by then, was teaching criminal justice at UVA. First Emily, then assault, then another underage victim. This is his pattern. You're probably right, Chen said gently, but probably isn't proof, and you need to let this go, Marcus. It's been 7 years. How do you let go of a 15-year-old girl who disappeared while taking pictures of a sunset? How do you tell her parents it's time to stop caring? Hayes still visited the Carter family occasionally. They'd aged dramatically. Susan's hair completely white, David's hands trembling with early-onset Parkinson's that his doctor said was stress-related. Tyler was in college now studying criminal justice, driven by his sister's case. Lily was 14, the same age Emily had been, a quiet girl who flinched at loud noises. "We still hope," Susan told Hayes during a visit in 2022. "Is that foolish? After 8 years, should we just accept she's gone?" "Hope is never foolish," Hayes said, though he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. Willow Creek Park continued to deteriorate. The city made periodic maintenance efforts, but the place had an atmosphere that kept people away. The playground equipment rusted. Weeds grew through cracks in the walking path. The memorial beneath the swing set, religiously maintained for the first 2 years, eventually faded away. Candles no longer lit, flowers no longer replaced, teddy bears stolen or rotted by weather. Only the weeping willow remained unchanged, its branches still reaching toward the ground like arms trying to embrace something that was no longer there. In 2023, a true crime podcast called Vanished did a 6-episode series on Emily's disappearance. The attention briefly reignited public interest. Online sleuths dissected every detail, created elaborate theories, some pointing at Mills, others suggesting completely different scenarios. The Carter family declined to participate in the podcast, finding the whole thing exploitative. "They're turning my daughter's tragedy into entertainment," David said bitterly to Hayes. "People listen while they're jogging or doing dishes like it's a fictional story. But Emily was real. She had dreams. She wanted to study photography at NYU. She was going to travel the world, capture beautiful moments, and now she's just content for people to consume." Hayes understood the anger. He'd watched true crime become an industry, watched people develop parasocial relationships with victims they'd never met, watched armchair detectives think they could solve cases that professional investigators had spent years on. But he also knew that sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, renewed attention led to new leads. Someone's memory jogged. Someone came forward. Some small detail that had seemed irrelevant years ago suddenly connected to something else. It didn't happen with Emily's case. By early 2024, Willow Creek Park was scheduled for renovation. The city had finally allocated budget to completely overhaul the space. New playground equipment, resurfaced paths, better lighting, security cameras. The goal was to reclaim the park, to turn it back into a community asset rather than a reminder of tragedy. "They're going to erase her," Susan said when she heard about the renovation plans. "They're going to cover everything up and pretend she never existed." But Hayes saw it differently. Maybe it's time. Maybe the community needs to heal. Emily wouldn't want children to be afraid of parks, would she? Construction was scheduled to begin in April 2024. The old playground equipment would be completely removed and replaced. New drainage systems would be installed. Even the weeping willow, diseased and dying, was marked for removal, a decision that sparked minor controversy among longtime residents who remembered when it had been planted decades earlier. On April 15, 2024, the construction crew arrived. They were a professional outfit from Richmond, JB Construction, specializing in municipal projects. The foreman, a burly man named Jack Patterson, had worked dozens of park renovations and wasn't superstitious about the location's history. "It's just a park," he told his crew. "Tragedy happened here, yeah, but that's not our concern. We're here to build something new, something good. Let's focus on that." The first week involved demolition and removal. The old swing set came down, its chains and seats loaded into a dumpster. The slide followed, then the merry-go-round. Workers operated excavators and backhoes, digging up the old foundation posts that had held the equipment in place. On April 22nd, a Monday morning with spring sunshine warming the muddy ground, a young worker named Danny Rodriguez was operating a backhoe near where the swing set had stood. His job was to dig down 18 inches, removing old foundations and preparing the ground for new installation. The backhoe's bucket bit into the earth, scooping up mud and rocks and decades of compacted soil. Danny dumped the load aside, prepared to take another scoop. But something in the pile caught his eye, something that wasn't dirt or rock. He climbed down from the machine, walked over to the mound of excavated earth. At first, he thought it was a tree root. Then he realized the shape was wrong. The texture was wrong. It was bone. Danny's hands began to shake. He'd worked construction for 5 years, had dug up all kinds of things. Old pipes, forgotten foundations, animal remains. But this wasn't an animal. The bone was too large, too distinctly human. "Jack!" he yelled, his voice carrying across the construction site. "Jack, You need to see this. Now! Patterson jogged over, annoyed at the interruption. What's the… He stopped when he saw what Danny was pointing at. His face went pale. Don't touch anything. Nobody touches anything. I'm calling the police. Within an hour, Willow Creek Park was once again filled with police vehicles, their lights flashing in grim echo of that night nearly 10 years ago. Crime scene tape went up. The construction workers stood in a cluster, smoking cigarettes and speaking in hushed tones. Detective Sarah Chen, technically retired but still consulting on cold cases, arrived at the scene. She stood at the edge of the excavation, looking down at what the backhoe had unearthed, and felt her heart break. The remains were incomplete, scattered by the excavation, damaged by time and elements. But there was enough. A skull, partially crushed, bones of varying sizes, scraps of fabric, denim, cotton, synthetic material that might once have been a jacket, and beneath it all, still partially buried, a camera, a Canon Rebel T3i, its lens cracked, its body corroded by years underground, but still recognizable. Chen pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and called Hayes. "Marcus," she said when he answered. "You need to get to Willow Creek Park. We found her. Emily was here the whole time." The call came at 11:47 a.m., shattering Marcus Hayes' quiet Monday morning. He'd been in his garage organizing fishing gear for a trip he'd planned with his grandson, when Sarah Chen's voice cut through his retirement like a knife. Emily was here the whole time. Those 6 words changed everything. Hayes dropped the tackle box he was holding, lures scattering across the concrete floor. "I'm on my way," he said, already moving toward his truck. The 20-minute drive to Willow Creek Park felt both endless and too short. Hayes' mind raced through a decade of investigation, all those searches, all those ground-penetrating radar scans they'd done in 2015 that had found nothing. How had they missed her? How had she been right there, beneath the playground where children had continued to play for months after her disappearance? The park was transformed into a crime scene for the second time in its history. Yellow tape cordoned off the entire construction area. Forensic teams in white suits carefully excavated around the remains, working with archaeological precision. Every handful of dirt was sifted, photographed, cataloged. Hayes ducked under the tape, flashing his retired detective credentials to the officer managing the perimeter. Chen met him halfway across the park, her face etched with a mixture of vindication and sorrow. "It's her, Marcus. I know it hasn't been officially confirmed yet, but it's her." Chen's voice was steady, professional, but Hayes could see the emotion in her eyes. "The camera is a Canon Rebel T3i, same model Emily had. The clothing remnants match what she was wearing, and the location." She gestured toward the excavation site, directly beneath where the swing set stood, the exact spot her camera bag was found. Hayes looked at the carefully gridded excavation. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Patricia Williams was crouched beside the remains, making notes on a tablet. She was a specialist the department called in for cases like this. Meticulous, experienced, unshakable. "What can you tell me?" Hayes asked, approaching carefully to avoid disturbing the scene. Dr. Williams looked up, her eyes shielded behind protective glasses. "Female, approximately adolescent based on bone development and size. I'll need to do full analysis in the lab, but preliminary examination suggests she was buried approximately 4 to 5 feet deep. The body was placed in what appears to have been a hastily dug grave. Irregular shape, no evidence of a prepared burial container. Cause of death? Too early to say definitively. There's significant trauma to the skull. Could be perimortem or postmortem. We'll need to examine the fracture patterns more closely." Dr. Williams carefully indicated an area of the skull without touching it. "But I can tell you this. Whoever buried her knew this location intimately. They dug beneath existing playground equipment, in soil that had been disturbed before, probably calculating that any anomalies in ground density would be attributed to the playground installation." Hayes felt sick. The professionalism in Dr. Williams's voice couldn't mask the horror of what she was describing. Someone had murdered a 15-year-old girl and buried her beneath a playground, a place where children laughed and played, where parents pushed their kids on swings, completely unaware of the grave beneath their feet. How long will full analysis take? Dental records can give us positive identification within 24 hours if we can get Emily Carter's dental records immediately. Full forensic analysis, toxicology, trauma assessment, any other evidence will take weeks. Hayes pulled out his phone. "I'll have her dental records to you within the hour." The next call was the one Hayes had been dreading for nearly 10 years. He stepped away from the excavation site, found a quiet spot near the park's entrance, and dialed David Carter's number. David answered on the second ring. "Detective Hayes?" His voice carried hope and fear in equal measure. After a decade of disappointments, the Carters had learned to expect bad news. "David, I need you to listen to me carefully." Hayes' throat tightened. "We've found remains at Willow Creek Park. We believe they're Emily's. I'm so sorry." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Then a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "Where?" David's voice was barely a whisper. "Beneath where the swing set used to be. The construction crew found her this morning." "She was there? All this time?" "We stood there." David's voice broke. "We left flowers there. We stood right on top of where our daughter was buried and we didn't know." "David, I need Emily's dental records. Can Susan call your dentist and authorize their release? We need positive identification." Yes, of course. I'll tell Susan." "Oh God, how do I tell Susan?" The sound of David Carter's world collapsing was something Hayes would never forget. Within 2 hours, Emily Carter's dental records were in Dr. Williams' hands. By 6 p.m. that evening, the confirmation came through. The remains were definitively identified as Emily Margaret Carter, missing since October 12, 2014, now recovered on April 22, 2024, 9 years, 6 months, and 10 days later. The news broke across every media platform. The case that had haunted Charlottesville for a decade suddenly exploded back into national consciousness. News vans descended on the quiet residential streets. Reporters camped outside the Carter home, outside Willow Creek Park, outside the police department. The headline on every channel was the same: "Missing teen found buried beneath playground where she vanished." Lieutenant James Morrison, who now headed the Major Crimes Unit, held a press conference at 8:00 p.m. Hayes stood in the back of the room, watching the media circus, feeling the weight of all those years pressing down on him. "Earlier today, construction workers at Willow Creek Park discovered human remains," Morrison said, his voice grave. "Those remains have been positively identified as Emily Carter, who disappeared from this same location in October 2014. We are treating this as a homicide investigation. I want to assure the community that we are devoting every resource to identifying and apprehending the person responsible for this crime." A reporter shouted from the crowd, "Is Robert Mills a suspect?" Morrison's expression hardened. "We are not commenting on suspects or persons of interest at this time. This is an active investigation." But the question had been asked, and now Mills's name was everywhere again. Social media exploded with theories, accusations, calls for vigilance. Hayes knew Mills would be hearing from police very soon. In fact, he already was. At the exact moment Morrison was holding his press conference, detectives from the Durham Police Department were knocking on Robert Mills' apartment door in North Carolina. Mills, now 53 years old, grayer and heavier than he'd been in 2014, opened the door to find 2 detectives and a warrant for his arrest. "Robert Mills, you're under arrest for the murder of Emily Carter," Detective James Bradford said, reading Mills his rights as handcuffs were placed on his wrists. "You have the right to remain silent." Mills said nothing. His face went pale, but he didn't protest, didn't proclaim innocence, didn't ask what evidence they had. He simply stood there as the handcuffs clicked shut, as his neighbors peered from their doorways as his life ended for the second time. The arrest made the late-night news. By the next morning, Mills was being transported back to Virginia for arraignment. His mugshot, baggy-eyed, defeated, guilty-looking even before trial, was plastered across every newspaper and website. But Hayes knew the real work was just beginning. Arresting Mills was one thing. Proving he'd murdered Emily Carter was another. The evidence was a decade old, compromised by time and the elements. They needed something solid, something that would hold up in court. Dr. Williams worked around the clock on the forensic analysis. The lab became her entire world, examining bones under microscopes, running chemical analyses, reconstructing what had happened to Emily Carter in her final moments. On April 25th, 3 days after the discovery, Dr. Williams called Morrison and Hayes into her office at the State Forensic Lab. Her expression was grim. "The skull fractures are definitely peri-mortem. They occurred at or near time of death," she said, pulling up images on her computer screen. The fracture patterns were visible in stark detail. "The injury patterns are consistent with blunt force trauma. Based on the fracture dynamics and location, I believe she was struck at least twice on the back of the head with a heavy cylindrical object." "Like what?" Morrison asked. "Could be many things. A pipe, a flashlight, A tire iron, something metal, heavy, approximately 2 inches in diameter. Dr. Williams scrolled through more images. There's also evidence of defensive injuries on the right forearm, fractures consistent with trying to ward off an attack. Hayes closed his eyes, imagining Emily's final moments. She'd tried to defend herself. She'd fought back. What about DNA? Please tell me there's something we can use. The soil conditions weren't ideal for DNA preservation, but we did recover some material from beneath the remains. Fibers, hair fragments. We're running analysis now. Dr. Williams hesitated. There's something else. We found this embedded in the soil near the skull. She held up an evidence bag containing a small, corroded metal object. Hayes leaned closer, trying to identify it. It's a name tag badge, Dr. Williams explained. The kind maintenance workers wear. Most of the identification is corroded away, but we were able to recover partial lettering using chemical enhancement. She pulled up another image, the badge under magnification with computer-enhanced lettering visible. Ober, Mill, Robert Mills, Hayes breathed. His name tag. He lost it when he buried her. That's circumstantial, Morrison cautioned, but even he looked excited. His defense will argue it could have been there for any reason. He worked at the park, could have lost it any time. Combine it with everything else, his lies about when he left, the timeline, his subsequent criminal history, and now this physical evidence linking him directly to the burial site. Hayes shook his head. That's not circumstantial. That's a pattern. Over the next week, forensic analysis continued to build the case. DNA from hair fragments found at the scene matched samples taken from Emily's bedroom, confirming the victim's identity beyond any doubt. More significantly, they found DNA from a second source on fibers recovered from the grave, and when compared to Robert Mills's DNA, taken from his arrest, they found a match. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was mounting. Mills had been at the park. He'd lied about when he left. His name badge was found in Emily's grave. His DNA was on fibers buried with her body. His subsequent criminal history showed a pattern of violence and predatory behavior toward young women. The prosecution, led by Commonwealth's attorney Elizabeth Thornton, believed they had enough for conviction. But there was one more piece of evidence that sealed the case: Emily's camera. The Canon Rebel T3i, buried with her body, was carefully excavated and sent to a specialized digital forensics lab. The prognosis wasn't good. The camera had been underground for nearly a decade, exposed to moisture and corrosion. The chances of recovering any data were minimal, but forensic technology had advanced significantly since 2014. Specialist Trevor Chang, who'd recovered data from devices in far worse condition, took on the challenge as a personal mission. This girl documented everything with this camera, Chang explained to Hayes during a visit to the lab. If there's any chance at all that she captured something that last day, I'm going to find it. For 2 weeks, Chang worked on the camera's corrupted memory card. The process was painstaking, using specialized software to reconstruct damaged sectors, to piece together fragments of data, to recover images that had been written over, corrupted, seemingly lost forever. On May 10, 2024, Chang called Hayes with news that would break the case wide open. I recovered 17 images from the memory card, Chang said, his voice trembling with excitement. Most are from earlier in the day, sunset shots, playground equipment, the willow tree. But the last 3 images. He paused. Detective Hayes, the last 3 images show Robert Mills. Emily photographed him approaching her. The timestamp on the last image is 6:04 p.m., exactly when Mills claims he was just doing routine closing procedures. Hayes felt electricity run through his body. Can you see what's happening in the photos? The first shows Mills in the background, near the maintenance shed. The second shows him closer, walking toward the camera position. The third, the last image Emily ever took, shows Mills approximately 15 feet away. His expression. Chang's voice faltered. Detective, his expression is not friendly. Emily knew something was wrong. She documented it in her last moments. The photos were devastating evidence. They placed Mills with Emily at the exact time she disappeared. They showed his approach, and Emily's decision to photograph him suggested she felt threatened, that she'd tried to document danger before it overtook her. When confronted with the recovered photographs during interrogation, Robert Mills finally broke. I didn't mean to kill her, he said, his voice hollow, his hands shaking. She took my picture. I asked her to delete it and she refused. She said she was going to report me for. I had been watching her for weeks. She noticed. She knew, and she was going to tell. The confession continued for 2 hours. Mills described how he'd panicked, how he'd struck Emily with a heavy flashlight he'd been carrying, how she'd fallen, how he'd realized what he'd done and, in desperation, had buried her beneath the playground, digging frantically in soil he knew was soft from the playground installation years earlier. "I thought no one would ever find her there," Mills said, tears streaming down his face. "I thought I could get away with it, and I almost did." The case against Robert Mills was airtight. The trial, held in September 2024, lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of abduction, guilty of concealing a body. At sentencing, the judge looked at Mills with undisguised contempt. "You murdered a child and buried her beneath a playground, a place meant to represent innocence and joy. You let her family suffer for 10 years, not knowing if their daughter was alive or dead. Your actions demonstrate the worst of human depravity." Robert Mills was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. The guilty verdict came down on September 27, 2024, at 4:47 p.m. The courtroom, packed with reporters, community members, and Emily's family, erupted in a mixture of sobs and relieved applause. Judge Patricia Brennan had to use her gavel 3 times to restore order, but even she seemed affected by the emotion in the room. Susan Carter collapsed into her husband's arms, her body racked with sobs that came from a decade of accumulated grief finally finding release. David held her, his own face wet with tears, his body shaking. Tyler sat rigidly beside them, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. Lily, now 16, older than her sister had been when she died, stared at Robert Mills with an expression of pure hatred. Mills sat at the defense table, his head bowed, refusing to look at the family he'd destroyed. His public defender, a young woman named Amanda Rodriguez who'd fought hard despite having virtually no case to work with, sat beside him with her own expression of relief that this was finally over. Detective Marcus Hayes stood in the back of the courtroom, his hand over his mouth, feeling 10 years of obsession culminate in this single moment. Sarah Chen stood beside him, gripping his arm, both of them crying without shame. "We got him," Chen whispered. "After all this time, we got him." "Emily got him," Hayes replied. His voice choked. She documented her own killer. Even in those last moments, she was thinking, fighting back the only way she could. The sentencing hearing 2 weeks later was even more emotionally devastating. The prosecution called several witnesses to give victim impact statements, painting a picture of the vibrant life that Robert Mills had stolen and the decade of suffering he'd caused. Susan Carter approached the witness stand slowly, looking frail and aged far beyond her 53 years. She clutched a folder containing photos of Emily, birthday parties, school events, family vacations, moments of an ordinary childhood that had been brutally cut short. "Emily was my firstborn," Susan began, her voice trembling but determined. "She came into this world screaming and beautiful, and from the moment I held her, my life had purpose. She was curious about everything, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. When she was 4, she asked me why the sky was blue. When I couldn't explain it properly, she went to the library and found a book about light and atmosphere. That was Emily, never satisfied with simple answers." Susan held up a photo of Emily at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing she'd made. She loved art. She loved capturing beautiful moments. When she discovered photography, it was like she'd found her calling. She would wake up early to photograph sunrises. She'd stay up late editing pictures on her computer. She saw the world differently than most people. She saw beauty in ordinary things. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of people quietly crying. On October 12, 2014, my daughter left our home to pursue her passion. She was going to take pictures of the sunset, something she'd done dozens of times before. It was supposed to be safe. Willow Creek Park was our neighborhood park. We trusted it. We trusted that our community would protect our children. Susan's voice broke. "But that man," she pointed at Mills without looking at him, "that man was watching my daughter, stalking her, and when she recognized the danger, when she tried to protect herself by documenting his behavior, he killed her." Susan wiped tears from her face with a shaking hand. "For 10 years I didn't know if my daughter was alive or dead. For 10 years I hoped that maybe she'd been taken somewhere far away, that maybe somehow she was still alive. That hope was torture. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time the phone rang, I wondered if it would be her. I kept her room exactly as she left it. I couldn't bear to change anything because that would mean admitting she was never coming home. She held up another photo. Emily at 14, camera around her neck, smiling at whoever was taking the picture. This is who my daughter was. She was kind. She was talented. She had dreams of going to NYU to study photography. She wanted to travel the world, to capture images that would make people see things differently. She wanted to make a difference. Susan finally looked directly at Robert Mills. You took all of that away. You took my daughter's life, her future, her dreams. You took my family's happiness and replaced it with a grief so profound that there are no words for it. You let us suffer for 10 years, knowing exactly where Emily was, knowing what you'd done, and you said nothing. You are a coward and a monster, and I hope you spend every remaining day of your life thinking about what you did to an innocent child. She stepped down from the witness stand, barely able to walk. David rushed to support her, and together they returned to their seats. David Carter spoke next, his testimony shorter but no less powerful. I'm a mechanic, he said simply. I fix things. When something's broken, I take it apart, figure out what's wrong, and put it back together. But there's no fixing what Robert Mills did to my family. He broke us in ways that can't be repaired. My wife hasn't had a full night's sleep in 10 years. My son has anger issues and trust problems. My youngest daughter has anxiety so severe she's on medication. And me, his voice faltered. I've been diagnosed with stress-related Parkinson's disease. The neurologist says the prolonged trauma likely triggered it. So Mills didn't just kill Emily. He's slowly killing me too. Tyler Carter gave a brief statement about growing up in the shadow of his sister's disappearance, about how it felt to watch his parents deteriorate, about the anger that consumed him. Lily was too emotional to speak, but her written statement was read by the prosecutor. Then came the expert witnesses, psychologists who explained the trauma of ambiguous loss, the specific torture of not knowing what happened to a loved one. Dr. Rachel Morrison, a specialist in family trauma, testified about the long-term psychological effects on the Carter family. Ambiguous loss is considered one of the most difficult forms of grief to process, Dr. Morrison explained. When someone dies, there's finality, painful, but clear. You can mourn, you can eventually move forward, but when someone disappears, the loss is frozen in time. You can't grieve properly because you don't know if they're dead or alive. You're trapped in a perpetual state of hoping and dreading. She consulted her notes. The Carter family spent a decade in this state. The psychological toll is immeasurable. They couldn't have closure, couldn't properly mourn, couldn't move forward. And Robert Mills knew this. He knew Emily's body was buried beneath that playground. He could have ended their suffering at any time by revealing what he'd done. Instead, he remained silent, adding cruelty to murder. The defense had little to offer in mitigation. Mills's attorney made a brief argument about his difficult childhood, about mental health issues, about how he'd shown remorse. But it was perfunctory. Even she seemed to recognize the futility of defending the indefensible. Mills himself was given the opportunity to speak. He stood slowly, his prison jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. He'd lost weight during the trial, looked older than his 53 years. I know nothing I say can make this right, Mills began, his voice barely audible. I know I destroyed a family. I destroyed a beautiful young girl's life. Every day since October 12, 2014, I've lived with the knowledge of what I did. I told myself I didn't mean for it to happen, that it was an accident that spiraled out of control. But that's not true. I made choices, terrible choices. I chose to watch Emily. I chose to approach her when she was alone. I chose to strike her when she tried to protect herself, and I chose to bury her and stay silent for 10 years. He looked toward the Carter family, though they refused to meet his eyes. I can't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I can't undo what I did. All I can say is that I'm sorry, and that I accept whatever punishment this court decides. Judge Brennan's sentencing was swift and severe. Mr. Mills, you committed one of the most heinous crimes imaginable, the murder of a child. You then compounded that crime by concealing her body in a location where her family continued to search, to hope, to suffer. You showed no remorse, no conscience, no humanity for 10 years. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. You will die in prison, and that is far more mercy than you showed Emily Carter. The gavel came down with finality. In the weeks following the sentencing, Charlottesville struggled to process what had happened. The case had gripped the community for a decade, and now it was over. But the resolution brought little sense of closure. Willow Creek Park became a crime scene memorial once again, this time with a different tone. Where before there had been hope, now there was grief mixed with anger. People left flowers, candles, and signs with messages for Emily. Some expressed rage at Mills. Others expressed guilt that the community hadn't protected one of their own. A town hall meeting was held in early October to discuss the future of the park. The debate was passionate and divisive. "We should tear it down," one resident argued. "Turn it into a memorial garden for Emily. No child should ever play there again." "That's exactly what we shouldn't do," another countered. "If we close the park, Mills wins. He doesn't just get to kill Emily. He gets to kill the joy that place represented. We should renovate it, dedicate it to Emily's memory, and let it be what it was always meant to be, a place for children and families." The Carter family was consulted about their wishes. After much painful discussion, they released a statement supporting the park's renovation and rededication. Emily loved Willow Creek Park. The statement read, "Some of her happiest memories were there. We don't want that place to become a monument to tragedy. We want it to be what Emily would have wanted, a place where children can play, where families can gather, where beauty and joy exist." We're asking the city to complete the renovation and to dedicate the park to Emily's memory. Let it be a place of life, not death. The city council voted unanimously to proceed with the renovation. The new playground was designed with input from the Carter family. Bright colors, modern equipment, safe and welcoming. A bronze plaque was installed near the entrance with Emily's photo and an inscription, "Emily Margaret Carter, 1999-2014. Daughter, sister, artist. She saw beauty in the world and captured it through her lens." This park is dedicated to her memory and to the belief that even in darkness, light can prevail. The renovation was completed in December 2024, and a dedication ceremony was held on what would have been Emily's 25th birthday. Hundreds of community members attended, many wearing purple, Emily's favorite color. Her high school photography class created a memorial display of sunset photos taken at the park, honoring Emily's final photographic mission. Detective Hayes attended the ceremony with Sarah Chen. They stood at the back of the crowd, watching as the Carter family unveiled the memorial plaque. Tyler spoke briefly, his voice strong despite obvious emotion. "My sister Emily taught me that beauty exists even in ordinary moments," Tyler said. "She taught me to pay attention, to notice things, to appreciate what's right in front of us. I'm studying criminal justice now because of what happened to her. I want to help families like mine. Families searching for answers, families living in that terrible uncertainty. Emily's case took 10 years to solve, but it was solved because people didn't give up, because Detective Hayes never stopped fighting for my sister, because the system, however slowly, eventually worked." He looked at the newly renovated playground, where children were already climbing and swinging and laughing. "This park is alive again. That's what Emily would have wanted. Not a shrine to sadness, but a place of joy. So to everyone here today, don't just remember how Emily died, remember how she lived. With curiosity, with passion, with hope." The ceremony ended with a balloon release. Hundreds of purple balloons floating into the winter sky, carrying messages of love and remembrance. Hayes watched them rise and disappear, feeling a weight lift that he'd carried for a decade. The case was solved. Justice had been served. Emily could finally rest. But as he left the park that day, passing by playing children and laughing families, Hayes couldn't help but think about all the other missing children, all the other families still searching, still hoping, still trapped in that terrible limbo of not knowing. Emily's case was closed, but somewhere someone else's nightmare was just beginning. That night, Hayes sat in his home office, surrounded by the files and notes he'd accumulated over 10 years. Sarah Chen had urged him to burn it all, to let it go, to truly retire, but Hayes knew himself too well. He opened his laptop and began typing a report, not for the department, not for the prosecution, but for himself. A comprehensive analysis of what they'd learned from Emily's case, what mistakes had been made, what protocols could be improved. Because if Emily Carter's death could prevent another tragedy, if the lessons learned could help solve another case faster, then perhaps some meaning could be found in the horror. His phone rang at 9:47 p.m. It was Morrison from the department. "Hayes, I know you're retired, but we've got a situation. 12-year-old girl missing from a park in Albemarle County. Parents say she went to walk the dog 2 hours ago. Dog came back alone. We could really use your expertise on this one." Hayes closed his eyes, felt the familiar weight settling back onto his shoulders. He thought about declining, about protecting his own peace, about truly retiring. Then he thought about Emily's parents standing at that ceremony today, about the decade they'd lost, about the relief and grief mixed in their eyes. "Send me the address," Hayes said. "I'm on my way." 3 months after Robert Mills was sentenced to life in prison, Marcus Hayes sat in the visiting room of the Red Onion State Prison in Wise County, Virginia. The maximum security facility was a bleak place. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, the constant hum of ventilation systems, and the ever-present tension of housing some of Virginia's most dangerous criminals. Hayes hadn't planned to make this visit. In fact, he'd resisted it for weeks. But there were questions that still haunted him, details that didn't quite fit, loose ends that his investigator's mind couldn't leave unexamined. Sarah Chen had argued against it. What could he possibly tell you that would matter now? She'd said over coffee at their usual cafe in downtown Charlottesville. "The case is closed," he confessed. "He's been convicted. Let it be finished, Marcus." "I need to understand the timeline," Hayes had replied, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "There's a gap, nearly 45 minutes between when Emily's scent trail ended and when Mills left the park according to traffic cameras. What was he doing during that time? And why did he come back to the park 3 days later? Security footage shows his van in the parking lot on October 15th, before the official search started. Why risk returning?" Chen had sighed, recognizing the obsessive quality in Hayes' voice that she knew too well from their years as partners. "You think there's more victims? I think Mills has been doing this longer than we know. The assault charge in Durham in 2017, the statutory rape in 2020, those weren't his first crimes. They couldn't have been. Sexual predators don't suddenly start at age 43. There's a history we haven't uncovered yet." Now, sitting across a scratched metal table from Robert Mills, Hayes studied the man who'd haunted his investigations for a decade. Mills looked diminished in his orange prison jumpsuit, thinner than during the trial, his hair now completely gray. His hands trembled slightly as he sat down, cuffed and shackled. "Detective Hayes?" Mills said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "I was surprised when they said you wanted to visit. I thought you'd be celebrating being rid of me." "I'm not here to celebrate," Hayes replied, his voice level and professional. "I'm here because I need answers to questions that are keeping me awake at night, and I think you need to give them to me." Mills's eyes flickered up briefly. "Why would I help you?" "Because you're going to die in this place, Mr. Mills. You're 53 years old, and you have life without parole. That means you have potentially 30, maybe 40 years to sit in a cell thinking about what you've done. I've read about you, your psychological evaluations, your history. You're not a psychopath. You have a conscience, however buried it is. And I think that conscience is going to torment you every single day, unless you do something to make amends." "Make amends?" Mills's laugh was bitter. "I killed a 15-year-old girl and buried her under a playground. There's no amending that." "No, there isn't," Hayes agreed. "But there might be other families out there, families like the Carters, who are living in that hell of not knowing. If you've hurt other people, if you know what happened to other missing girls, telling the truth now is the only decent thing you'll ever do again." The silence stretched between them. Mills stared at his shackled hands, his jaw working as if fighting some internal battle. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "There aren't others. Not like Emily, but there are others." It wasn't a question. Mills nodded slowly. "Different. Not. I never killed anyone else. I swear to God. Emily was. That was a panic reaction. I never meant for it to happen that way. Tell me about the others." Over the next 2 hours, Mills described a pattern of behavior that stretched back to his early 20s, watching women and girls, following them, collecting information about their routines. A college student in Roanoke in 1995 whom he'd stalked for months. A teenager in Richmond in 2003 he'd followed home from the mall repeatedly. Dozens of instances where he'd indulged his compulsions without actually making contact. "It was like an addiction," Mills explained, his voice hollow. "I knew it was wrong. I'd tell myself to stop, that I was going to get caught, that I was becoming a monster. But then I'd see someone, usually young, usually alone, and the compulsion would take over. I had to know about them, had to watch them, had to." Mills exhaled shakily. "With Emily, it was different. She was always at the park, alone with her camera. I started timing my shifts to see her. At first I just watched. Then she noticed." Hayes nodded. "And when she started taking pictures of you, I panicked," Mills said. "She said she'd call the police. I just swung the flashlight. She fell, and there was so much blood. I killed her in seconds." Hayes stayed composed. "Why bury her under the playground?" No one would look there. I'd helped install the equipment years ago. The ground was already disturbed. I dug for nearly an hour, covered it, and left. Her camera was buried with her. Her phone was on the bench. I left it so it looked like she vanished from there. 3 days later, you came back. Hayes pressed. I had to be sure it looked undisturbed. Police were everywhere, and I walked right over her grave. I was terrified but also arrogant. I thought I'd gotten away with it. Hayes' voice hardened. You let her family search while you stood there. I know. I was in survival mode. I wasn't thinking about them, just myself. He admitted returning to the park for months afterward, even watching people leave flowers once it reopened. That's when I left Charlottesville, he said. I couldn't stand seeing it. When Hayes questioned his later crimes, Mills insisted, Emily broke me. I never killed again. I saw her face in every nightmare. Every playground made me sick. I tried to forget, but it never left me. Hayes leaned forward. Good, you should live with that. Emily didn't get the chance to live at all. I know, Mills whispered. If I could trade places, I would. There are no more bodies, detective. Just me and what I did. Before leaving, Hayes asked about the badge found in the grave. Mills blinked. It must have fallen off while I was digging. I didn't even notice. Maybe part of me wanted to be caught. That badge convicted you, Hayes said coldly. You and Emily both left behind the truth. Justice was inevitable. Mills stared at the floor. Do you believe in hell because I'm already there? You should be, Hayes replied. At least you're in a cage where you can't hurt anyone else. On the long drive back to Charlottesville, Hayes replayed every word. The confession fit the evidence. No loose ends, no other victims. Mills was broken, haunted beyond repair. When he reached home, Sarah Chen was waiting with 2 coffees. You went to see him, she said. I needed closure, Hayes admitted, and I think I got it. Emily was his only murder. It's over. Good, Chen said softly, because you've carried her for 10 years. Now it's time to start carrying yourself. They sat in quiet understanding as night fell. Somewhere in Charlottesville, the Carter family was learning to live again. Grief therapy, small steps toward healing. Tyler was finishing his criminal justice degree, hoping to become a detective like Hayes. Lily had begun to smile again, and their parents were slowly finding peace. Willow Creek Park had come back to life. Children played daily, unaware of the tragedy once buried beneath the playground. Emily's memorial plaque was adorned with flowers from her old photography club, which had created a scholarship in her name. The case changed Charlottesville. Security cameras were added to parks, background checks tightened, and Emily's Law passed in early 2025, enforcing stronger public safety measures. A year after her body was found, a remembrance ceremony was held at the park. Hayes stood at the back with Sarah Chen as Tyler Carter spoke. My sister's death exposed a predator, Tyler said, but it also revealed something else, the power of persistence and the truth that justice, however delayed, can prevail. Detective Hayes never gave up. Neither did this community. He looked toward the children playing. Emily loved this park. Now it's beautiful again because we turned grief into action and loss into legacy. That's how we honor her, by protecting others. After the ceremony, Susan Carter approached Hayes. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held calm. Thank you. You never stopped fighting for Emily. She deserved justice, Hayes replied. I heard you're helping with other missing children's cases, she said. Keep doing it, it matters more than you know. As Hayes and Chen walked away, Chen murmured, You know, Emily saved herself. Her photos convicted him. She was brave, Hayes said. I hope she knows her courage mattered. That evening, Hayes packed away the files, photos, and reports that had consumed a decade of his life. The case was solved. Justice was done. It was time to move forward. Then the phone rang. Morrison from the department. 10-year-old boy missing in Lynchburg. Caught on camera getting into a blue sedan. We need your help. Hayes looked at the stacked boxes, closure in cardboard form, and hesitated. Then he said, Send me everything. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Because that's who he was. And somewhere, Emily Carter, the girl who captured her own killer, would understand. The work was never truly finished. But tonight one case was closed. One family had answers and one killer was behind bars. It was enough.